sometimes the early bird gets the worm. I mean, I was just like right on it. I think that pretty much the day it was there, I was like, well, I mean, the Night Ranger had opened for Whitesnake, and I'd met David, and I knew Reb, I knew Doug, and I thought one way or another, I should be able to get some videos to David and maybe get an audition.
Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hey, welcome to another episode of 10,000 Miles. Today's guest is one I've been looking forward to having on. And it was a little easier than I deserved to get Joel to come on. So, Joel, right up front, thank you for saying yes so quick. But when you get referred by other people who they know and trust, like, Dino Jalusic, it was probably like, oh, yeah, he did the Dino thing. That's cool. I'll have him on. Joel is a world-class guitarist. He's been in Whitesnake, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, did a run in Night Ranger, bunch of other things, spent time on Broadway and Rock of Ages, has his own project, Joel Hoekstra's 13. But this is not really going to be about his resume today. We're going to get into that because he's done a tremendous amount of really cool stuff. This is going to be about what it took for him to build the technical and literary competency to become a great musician, learn how to tour. What's it like on the tour and the big stages versus the clubs? We want to find out from you, Joel, were there any shortcuts? Was there any luck involved? But we know I know you worked your ass off. I mean, that I know. Nobody gets to play at the level you get to play out without all the wood shedding. And for those out there, that's a musician term about really practicing and playing a lot of guitar. So, Joel, thanks so much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Good. Joel, where did this all begin? I read a little bit that you had some nice musical influence growing up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, basically grew up with classical musicians for parents. And they had me on cello and piano when I was really young. And that's not to say that I was good at those. That's sometimes people think, oh, I was just a kid, like basic beginner kind of stuff. And it didn't really stick with me at the young age. I was just like interested in sports, mainly playing baseball specifically. It was kind of my first obsession in life. And then all that kind of changed in seventh grade. I believe I always estimate to be the age of 11, where I basically was exposed to AC/DC. And then that was the first time where I liked music instead of just kind of growing up with music constantly happening in the house. Just Angus Young specifically was an inspiration for me, just seeing all the energy. So it was a lot of like just the presence, like the vibe, all the energy and just is what all his moves and everything. I mean, I was just like, this guy's the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life. I want to be him.
Yeah, totally. Angus is the man.
That was when I went to my parents and asked for a guitar. So that's the beginning for sure.
How'd they respond to that coming from the classical background? And you didn't ask for a nylon string classical guitar, I suppose.
Well, I was told I could start guitar. It was on my stepmom's acoustic briefly, and that was not going well. So they sent me to a teacher, and he was teaching me out of the Alfred's Method book, learning the 3 notes on the high E and then the notes on the E, etc. And I was like not enthused. I was like, it feels just like piano lessons did. And how do I get to be able to play rock, basically? Back then, it was such a different era. I mean, we didn't have the exposure that people have now where they know it's a reality that you can play like that. I mean, back then, the rock stars seemed like deities or something. Like it was like impossible to achieve that. They must have been born with this ability or something, that it was just unattainable. Luckily, I had a friend who had an electric guitar. I went over to his house and he pulled out his guitar and he started playing rock riffs, and my brain just kind of like exploded. And I went like, how do you know how to do this? And he was like, oh, you got to go to my teacher. He teaches the rock stuff. So
totally.
And that was just where I was growing up in suburban Chicago. That meant going to the local mall, basically, and taking lessons with a teacher. He did do some of the method book stuff, and we were working on reading a bit, but primarily I think we would do like 10 minutes of that, and then 20 minutes we're learning a song. And that's why I was there. was to learn the song. So he taught me, the first lesson was teaching me the verse riff to Paranoid, and then I was off and running.
Nice. Not my first guitar teacher. My first guitar teacher was in group lessons when I lived in Brooklyn, New York. And I used to go to a high school during the summer for like these 8-week courses every Saturday, 20 kids. And then I went through level 1, then level 2. And my parents like, oh, he really likes this. So that guy was a guy named Don Commanda who wrote some books. And I took lessons from him privately for a short period of time before we moved to New Jersey. And so then I went for that next year, really just continuing to teach myself. And then my mom had found out through work that there was a neighbor of one of her coworkers, a guy named Al Del Russo, who taught guitar. So she took me over to Al, and I walk in, dude's blind. Okay. Wow. So I'm like, okay, we're not reading music, but this was a bit of a gift because this guy, everything was ear training, Joel, everything. And so he was teaching me scales and he was teaching me keys, and like we got through all this stuff. And then about halfway through the lesson, he'd reach over to his turntable, put on a song, and with the little, the little pitch control on it, get it where we were in tune at 440 with the guitar because, yeah, totally. And so once we were there, he'd be like, all right, I want you to try to figure out the chord progression to this song. Like, listen to it. This is what key is it in? First, tell me what key it's in. And, obviously I start off, it just completely sucks. I'm all over the place. But over the course of years, he would always find another song, Joel, to put in where maybe they were doing something in the solo that would be like a new mode or a new scale or something that I had not learned. So it was the ear training, but he discovered things in songs. It was like, yes, you don't know that because, and he'd give me that stuff. So, but man, if we had the resources we have today, if we had them back then, because you're right. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in pretty much in the 70s. I was born in 64. Mm-hmm. I started playing guitar in the 70s, and I was starting to get pretty good. Elliot Easton from the Cars was like, he was one of my guys. He had all these tasty solos, right? Steve Miller Band, right? All this stuff's happening. And then 1978 comes around, and Van Halen 1 comes out. Uh-huh. And I remember sitting there with the flesh melting off my face. And as much as I felt like excited about the band and the music, I temporarily got really defeated. I was like, I was so close. I was so close to being able to play most of the stuff that I was listening to, even learning open tunings with the Stones and doing all this stuff. And then just Eddie made me realize not only what was possible, but how much more there is to go. And like you said, then I sought out the teachers who could teach that stuff. And unfortunately, I had a crappy experience with the guy I went to, because he was like, oh yeah, we're going to learn this Van Halen thing today, and I'll be right back. And he would walk out of the room for like 10 minutes and come back and go, goes like this. Okay, I'll be right back. And he'd walk out. He was amazing. He was a great player. He was not interested in it. But so when you said when you're talking about the resource and you're talking about chasing the teacher who can teach you the new things that you didn't know were even possible, man, you woke up a story inside of me for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I spent a lot of time myself. I think a lot of it was the ear training back then, just inherently, because beyond taking a lesson to learn a song, which was great. And, the other thing that I want to point out that was kind of cool about that era was he would show me a song. This is the pre-tab era even. Yeah. There was no, hey, I'm going to jot this down for you. So if you didn't practice it and remember it, you just threw away your money for the lesson.
Totally.
I vividly remember.
I walked in with the old boombox with a cassette, and I hit record. That's how I recorded my lessons.
I mean, I remember like waiting for my mom to pull around and pick me up and practicing in the doorway of the mall so I wouldn't forget what he just showed me, and making sure that it stuck with me, and then practicing hard when you got home that night to make sure, like, let's make sure it's there tomorrow when you wake up. And that way you'd at least remember it for the week to be able to go through. So that was good training in a way. I mean, it's nice to have they have it there and be able to go back and watch video these days if you take a lesson, and be able to access it all. But it was also really cool to not have it there. And I was like, man, if you don't remember this, like
It's true.
that's it.
So true. Hey, Joel, what was the first sign like when did the light bulb come on that you said, hey man, I want to do this for my life as a career versus, you were getting into guitar, you just were playing, you were learning, you were coming up. What was that magical moment for you? When did that light bulb come on?
It's almost like the decision never really got made. I just did it.
Wow.
I think from that moment of starting learning the rock stuff, as close as you could come to some kind of accurate description of that moment would be, but it was kind of like, what are you going to go to college for? And I was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to go to GIT. And I was going to be 17. I was like a year ahead in school. So I was going to be really young doing that and not ready at all to go off to Hollywood basically on my own. And so my parents talked me in a couple of years of community college. And I think more or less like the decision was made roughly out of like, well, when you're done with school, like just know that if you want to do this, we're not going to be paying your bills and things like that. Like you're not going to get financial help. So just make sure that you understand once you're done going to school, like whatever it is that you're doing. So I think my dad got his doctorates, and I think he was a little bit more into like going the educational route. I was a little bit more into going the real world route. Like I just wanted to get out there and do it and just figure out a way to make it happen. And I suppose like that becomes the most challenging right around that era where your friends that did commit to the normal life of like getting their bachelor's or their master's or whatever, and then they graduate and they got their own condo or whatever. They got a job, they're getting a condo, they're getting married. And you're like the guy who's like teaching guitar students and gigging on weekends in bars and, nobody's heard of you. And so I think there was a moment in there where I had to just commit to a lifetime of poverty.
Okay.
Like, okay, well, I mean, even if this doesn't work out, like this,
you were the rock and roll priest.
I think it's important to be able to commit to that. You almost have to have that in music. Like if you're not going to be happy doing it and being unsuccessful, it's very hard to, I suppose, commit to a lifetime of it because there's going to be moments where it looks like it's not going to work. And then at least for me, I mean, it took a while. There's some people that are really, I suppose blessed and it like clicks right away. And they have a career from the time they're very young. The way things aligned for me is I did go to GIT after the couple of years at community college, which was classical guitar. Like I was.
What years did you go to GIT? I'm just curious because I have a friend that went.
I went 90, 91, I want to say.
When did?
And then 90, 91, or either that or 91, 92. Because then I stayed in LA one more year and worked at Cherokee Studios after that.
Oh, you did?
Upon getting out of GIT, I just was confronted with like go back to the suburbs of Chicago. And one of my early guitar teachers, the second guitar teacher I had, TJ Helmrich, they hired him in the same mall store. TJ is a technically proficient guitar player who went out a little more in the fusion scene, has some albums out with Brett Garcid that were on the Legato label, which was Mike Varney's brother, Mark.
Yeah. Okay.
And great stuff. I mean, both those guys are like, incredible players. And I was lucky to have them, lucky to have TJ as my second teacher because the bar was really high. The bar was really high for my parents, and the bar was high, period, in the 80s. There were a lot of great players. So I guess we're talking late 80s at that point in time. But my time at GIT, a lot of that, Brett was already on the charts with Nelson, like had a #1 hit. I remember vividly being on my way out there being like, oh, TJ knows this guy's friends with them. And now, well, we had formed a friendship too. So I'd pretty much spend a lot of nights like jamming with those guys, jamming with TJ and Brett. And it wasn't like you picture where we were trying to like cut each other's heads. I mean, we would just like, we'd do the thing where there was like the drum kit and there was the bass and like, we would just jam and like part, and so we're younger and you just hang in the rehearsal space and party and just jam all night long. And sometimes you're on guitar, sometimes you're on bass, sometimes you're playing drums, or
Love
sometimes
it.
you're singing, whatever the heck,
Love it.
Yeah.
Those, I owned a recording studio for a little while in New Jersey, and I used to get to the studio hours and hours before sessions and I was a one-man band. I occasionally had an assistant, but I was producing, engineering, mixing, doing all this stuff, occasionally arranging and some writing depending on the project. But I used to get there hours and hours before to play instruments that I didn't always play.
Mm-hmm.
My drum chops got so good during those years. I was like, I could track. I could definitely track and make this shit. I was the guy who just jammed that click track in my head, and I was going to be Mr. Time, And then keys, I was always a pretty decent, I wouldn't call myself a piano player, more of a keyboard player, but I was committed because if I had somebody come in and they needed other players, it's like I could play that. I bought a Hammond B3 with a Leslie, and I had a Juno 60 and a DX7 and a Prophet 5. And I had all these cool freaking synths. And I had a blast, man. I had such a good time. But those jam sessions, I used to love when other musicians come in. I'd be like, okay, who's missing? All right, I got that. And I'd pop in and we would just play just nothing for hours, man, and just explore and have the best time. That's really how you get great. I mean, you're exercising a part of your brain that just doesn't get done in practicing by yourself.
Yeah. Learning to play in an ensemble setting. I mean, I try and do to this day a lot more of that than I think is probably the MO of the current generation. I mean, I spend a lot more time trying to get good put myself in as many actual pro situations as possible rather than kicking around practicing the melodic minor scale through the circle of fifths, improvising for hours on end or whatever. I mean, it's great. There's times where stuff like that is done and it's fun to explore the weird stuff, but you're touching on time there. So much of how far you go kind of comes down to rhythm guitar and just being able to play in the pocket.
Totally.
I try to put myself in as many situations like that as possible, all the way to date, to right now. Just try to figure out as many situations that'll really help me be like a musical musician, as opposed to
a guitar player. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I mean, I am definitely a guitar player over everything else. There's no question. That's for whatever reason, the primary focus. I want to be good at the singular instrument more than be a multi-instrumentalist. But that being said, I try to do it in the real world.
That's my distinction. When I said a guitar player versus a musician, I think guitar player gets up and plays and he can play by himself really, really well and doesn't understand dynamics, doesn't understand the pocket, doesn't understand where to fit, doesn't understand the sounds and all the things necessary to fit in the gig you're doing. Whether it be creating something on your own, filling in for somebody, doing Rock of Ages on Broadway, you got to know where you fit and all of that. To me, Joel, I think that's part of being a musician, to understand the entire canvas. Of course, your instrument's guitar.
I'd say if I had to really rate what my forte is at this point in time, well, preparation has always been a big thing with me. I'm a guy who will do his homework really hard for gigs or just, and that even comes down to tracking. I mean, I'll go as long as possible to get the absolute best take out of myself. I tend not to settle. But beyond that, I would say it's having the ear for what's going to make the song work, creating the right part for things to make a song work. So if I have a track from somebody, I take pride in being able to understand where the gap is between the vocal and have something respond that's the perfect line, or have lift parts for the chorus to make the chorus pop or be more memorable, whether that just be a lifting or sometimes a secondary hook, or something that is going to fill the gap. But sonic part creation, there's an art to that, right? The busier everybody else is, the less busy you have to be. And
you got it.
and vice versa. If something's really, really open and too open, then you've got to find a way to make that interesting. So that's kind of what I dig doing, more than let me just show off what I can do, regardless of what everybody's doing around me.
Joe, walk me through the progression of bands you've been in and the gigs you've done. Take me through a few minutes on each,
Man. Dude, it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls. I started out my first band. Finally, I would jam with drummers and like partial bands until I got to be 15, and then I finally did my first gigs and had my first band. And we did a mixture of our originals and covers, and we were terrible and everything. I have the recordings of us in the studio. They were a little bit older than me, but I was 15 when that started happening, like playing gigs. And then a little bit of like a secondary band with that. Then the era where I was doing classical guitar and GIT, and not doing a whole lot of that during that time. A lot of recording on my 4-track back then. Like I had the drum machine and was really in making my instrumentals. The guitar instrumental scene was really big at that point in time. We're talking about when, like, early on, the Yngwie thing, but the Satriani and Vi, and having those records go at that time platinum. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the avenue that I was thinking, okay, well, that's probably where I could head. Just got to find my own voice, my own signature thing with this. And then as I guess the world would present it for me, by the time GIT ended, and I worked at Cherokee right then is when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out in the 90s. Really, it was like everything just kind of changed. In a lot of ways, the best thing that ever happened to me, because that opened up an era of making yourself valuable without being able to fall back on, look, I can play fast or something, right? So that sort of set off just a career of doing whatever it took to be like a pro guitar player and survive in the era. And sometimes I was still finding like ways to play that style of music. So basically Chicago, like I went back after the year at Cherokee, year at GIT, year at Cherokee, to the Chicago suburbs, took on a roster of 70 students who was gigging in weekends at a band called Black Bison that we just wrote our own songs, same thing, some covers. We were better than my 15-year-old band. Obviously, everything had like stepped up in terms of talent. And then that band kind of was a little bit of an offshoot. Some of that band came to what we called the Resin Diggers at the time, which was a little bit more, the songs were kind of funky, and we had really like fun titles. The main thing was trying to find something that was a little bit different. But we would play anywhere from disco songs to covering Frank Zappa songs.
Nice.
We were out there, and we like to see in a bar, and we were wearing strange outfits, and
wish I had some video of that.
This cheap hat on me and stuff, kind of crazy, wild. I had a lot of like really look fails, like leading into. It's funny because everybody thinks
you want to see a look fail. There's one right there. That's me.
That's solid.
That's 80s, dude.
I was gonna say that's solid 80s right there. I didn't have the solid 80s when the 80s were happening. I had short hair in my first band. The guys that were in the band kind of hated me because they were like, well, begrudgingly had me in there because I could play. They were like, this guy's got no image whatsoever. And so it took a long time for all that stuff to click. But eventually I went through in a little period of like playing in like a wedding band, I guess mid-20s, gigging, doing that, while still maybe doing other bands. I kind of forget exactly the overlap, but then eventually kind of wound up in the Chicago scene playing with Kathy Richardson. She sings for Jefferson Starship these days, and she had a good thing going on. So she not only sings great, but she plays guitar and plays keyboards. So she had her CDs at the time that were out that had sold well. So it was mainly her material that we'd play, and like some covers. And that was the first time locally things kind of took off for me. And then Jim Peterick, who founded Survivor, he basically lived in the area still. And so he kept an eye on who was in Kathy's band and knew she was only hiring people I could play. So he had me in for sessions, and then he put me in his house band for what was called World Stage, where he would basically have guests come out and sing like 3 songs, something like that. So that was a big step for me, and I owe a lot to Jim because I was just a local Chicago musician, and suddenly you do these gigs. It was only like one a year though, but it was an annual thing where I got to back up a lot of famous singers. Like, so
Nice.
Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon and Don Barnes from 38 Special, Rick Emmett from Triumph and Alan Parsons, Kip Winger. Like, I mean, everybody would come out and do a few songs. And by the end of the gig, you're like, I mean, it was a great opportunity for a guy. I think it probably at that point in time, we're probably talking starting that maybe 26, 27 years old. And so I was getting to back up some famous people. And then it's that point in time where there's kind of two parallel roads that form. So Kathy Richardson got a gig as Janis Joplin with Love Janis. We kind of spoke to falling into the Les Paul thing, I think before we were recording today. But so she got that. And then I ended up landing in the band for that when it came to New York City. I was still flying back and doing Jim's world stage gigs like once a year. So I'm playing 8 shows a week in this theater in New York, pretending I'm in Big Brother and the Holding Company, basically. SG up here, the super reverb, grew my
and the mutton chops.
Yeah, the mutton chops. And that was when I had, so the short hair at that point in time, I'd been through a couple long hair periods since then, but I had cut it short again. It was the 90s. Everybody was looking for something that worked. I mean, it was like, I had this really awful look of having it really short with bleach blonde and was waxing spikes on it. So, I mean, just like, so for you to look at me now and be like, dude, really? That was you? So in fact, in Kathy's band, my thing was to dress like a pimp. I was called, my name on stage was the Pimp. And so I had all these different pimp suits and sunglasses and hats and kind of I mean, the 90s were anything goes but the 80s, I feel like, you know,
Pretty
it was
much,
like,
yeah.
as long as you weren't going up on stage with an 80s look, it flew. It was fine. You know, it was like fun. Anyway, so going back and doing Jim's gig still, that was in a situation where Kelly Kagi from Night Ranger was one of the people that did those shows. So he'd be there. And so I feel like he was there every year. So I feel like I did like 7 of those or something with him before I went to one and found out that like they'd parted ways with Jeff Watson. I was talking with Kelly's wife actually at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember her saying, "Oh, Jeff's not with us anymore." And I was like, "Really? Like, what happened there?" She said, "Well, you know, Reb Beach is doing it right now." And I said, "Oh, well, he's great." And as you know, time would tell, I'd end up in a band with Reb, which is kind of funny, and working with him. But she said he's going to have to go back to Whitesnake. They just have a year off of touring, and so it's temporary. You should definitely keep in touch. And that night I talked to Kelly and was like, "Hey man, you know, you should have called me," and blah, blah, blah. And I play Les Paul. I can do the 8-finger technique. And so as it turned out, like shortly thereafter, I mean, immediately after, so in the parallel roads at this point in time, the director from Love Janis sent me on the road with another show of his. It Ain't Nothing But the Blues. And I think I was on the road with that or with Love Janis, because he would send me to regional theaters. So he'd go like live in a city for like a month and a half and play that show 8 a week. I had, upon the closing of Love Janis, ended up starting to gig in the oldie scene a little bit. I was playing with the Turtles. My long story, but one of my subs on Love Janis, the show about Janis Joplin, played Turtles. So they sent me in subbing for him. And then he was coming back and their bass player quit. And they said they liked me as a person. So they said, "Do you play bass?" And I said, "I do now."
Yeah, it has 2 less strings. Of course I play bass.
I needed a gig. So I started out playing bass for them. And then eventually there was a time swap. So there's a lot of these things. One thing about my career is I always kind of had different irons in the fire. So doing the regional theater stuff, flying from whatever city I was in, I'd find a sub in those cities and go off and play whatever gigs I had with the Turtles. The other thing was the music director from Love Janis was Sam Andrew from Big Brother and the Holding Company. And they always kind of rotated second guitar players on their gig as well. They had parted ways with James Gurley, who was one of the founding members of that band. And so sometimes I'd be playing with Big Brother and the Holding Company, sometimes with the Turtles, and doing Love Janis on the road. Well, anyway, the Night Ranger thing was kind of the thing where it went from like guy who's working a lot on guitar and making his living at it. I should point out that the teaching thing gave me legs. Again, let me get there because I didn't make enough money to live when I started doing it. So having the 70 students a week, but being able to gig, that helped me get there. And then when I got the Love Janis gig and I went to New York, that was the first period of my life where I wasn't teaching and only performing. And that took me all the way till I was probably 30 years old.
Amazing.
Third parallel road, at that point in time, I had started making my own music. So I started with an album called Undefined that was kind of instrumental and fusiony. And that came through the TJ Helmrich and Brett Garside combination, because I was in touch with them in LA, and TJ now was head of RIT, which is a division of Musicians Institute. GIT is more well known, but the Recording Institute of Technology. So we had free studio time. Cell, Neve, whatever. And so they're playing with this incredible rhythm section, Virgil Donati, who's like insane on drums. I don't know if you're familiar with Virgil, and Rick Fiorabracci, incredible bassist. And so they were doing their instrumental stuff with those guys. And I went out to LA to hang, and they said like, hey, if you ever have anything you want us to play on. So I went ahead and thought, well, I should do this. So make it Undefined. I'm playing Love Janis, all this kind of stuff. And so I did 3 of those instrumental albums. I did Undefined, The Moon is Falling, which is more proggy. That was distinctly, I remember writing those riffs during Love Janis. And then something called 13 Acoustic Songs, which is fingerstyle acoustic. And released those, and I looked at those like, hey, solo albums. I want to do my own music too. But I was having a good time doing these gigs. So anyway, Night Ranger. Sorry, you can see I had a lot of irons in the fire. I told you.
That's cool though, man. I love this path. The Turtles. I mean, I did not expect that coming out of today.
Yeah. I know there's
great.
A lot of weird stuff like that for somebody who, like, a lot of people just summarize as like a guy who, was in Whitesnake for a bit or whatever, or is in Whitesnake, depending how you want to look at it. It's now basically retired band with David retiring. But it's a different story. But anyway, that got me the opportunity to go in with Night Ranger because Kelly said Reb needed to miss a show. He wasn't done yet, but he needed to miss a show. And he goes, there's this guy that plays with Jim Peterick, and this guy gets off the plane. He flies in from New York back to Chicago, and he knows like 36 songs, and you don't have to rehearse with them. So again, to get back to the preparation, that's kind of what opened a lot of doors for me. Was I was insane. I mean, I was playing 8 shows a week, which is a lot. But I would still get home that night and run 36 songs. So I'd go like, okay, I got to spend like 3-4 hours and run through the set before I get off the plane and go to play this, because there's not going to be a rehearsal. So I'd go in and do those Peter gigs, and that's what got me the opportunity with Night Ranger. And then it was because it was going to be the same deal. They weren't going to fly some guy out and do 5 rehearsals with them. They were like, this is like a casino gig. Like we need a guy to step in. Come in and step in. So I went and did a gig with them as more or less my audition in a way, because I said, please keep me in mind when Reb goes back. And that definitely came to fruition. They had me in starting in 2008 full time. So at this point in time, I feel like that's first time anybody
How long did you spend with Night Ranger? How many years?
7 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
Basically top of 2008 through like mid 2014. And so the way things kind of congregated again, reconfigured, is that Night Ranger happened. So no longer doing the Turtles or Big Brother, the holding company. That was kind of my band thing. And then another parallel road, got a guy who lives a couple blocks from me here, who's a traditional pit musician, like one of the top call guitar players in New York. And he asked me, he found out I know how to read and play classical. And he was like, do you ever consider doing pit stuff? I was like, dude, I don't think I'm a good enough reader. Like, I mean, I read like, okay, but like going in, don't you have to sight read? And he's like, no, I'll get you the scores. I'll get you sit next to me. I'll get you an audio recording of the show, and you work with the book and you get it together at home. And then you come in and you do it. And so I thought, okay, that sounds like I'll put in whatever kind of work. And that's why I had to do stuff like you're talking about. Like I'd be like learning tenor banjo. Like the first score I learned from him was The Boy from Oz, which was Hugh Jackman. And that was, really fun getting to meet Hugh and, all that kind of stuff for this suburban Chicago kid and Broadway pit. And I did think like this is probably something I want to keep alive, because maybe it's something I want to do when I'm older. Like if I want to, like if things don't go great for me or whatever, maybe and those are good gigs to have. Pit gigs are good gigs. They pay well. And like, if that's your route, I don't turn my nose up at that. There's a lot of great musicians that do that.
A lot of great musicians. I always love going to Broadway for the pit musicians? I mean, obviously the shows are great and the
Mhm.
sets and the acting and all of that, but the pit musicians are just, night after night doing it, doing it, doing it. And the guy, the conductor watching videos, doing stuff. I mean, all that under the stage kind of stuff was
Mhm.
super cool, but you never heard a clam. You never heard a bad note.
Yeah. Yeah. You
I
pretty
mean,
much weren't invited back if you made mistakes. There
never heard.
I got a really funny story about that with the so after I'd learned his Boy from Oz, I learned La Cage aux Folles, which half of that was archtop. It was all that chuck 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 kind of stuff, and half
Yeah.
of it was tenor banjo. So I did like half tenor banjo, half archtop guitar on that, subbing for him. And then he got Tarzan, which was Phil Collins had written the music. And
Okay.
I was going to be, he needed to sub out early. And I think I was the first person to go in and sub. And I was super stressed. This was a situation where you had to play cavaquinho. You had to, I don't know if people really that don't know how it works to sub on Broadway, but you need to be in the right pickup selector position. It's marked on the score. You need to do your own monitor mix, like press the right monitor mix for certain songs. To play the cavaquinho, I needed to swing out a condenser mic and turn it on with a switch. If you forgot any of this stuff,
Tell the audience what a cavaquinho is.
just a very tiny kind of, like almost like a ukulele type instrument,
Yep.
mandolin type instrument. But yeah, I was getting ready like to play my first one there. I'm just stressed out of my mind. And I see somebody come walking into the pit. Like you, I was there hours ahead. And I'm going through my intention was to go through the whole book before it was just about to happen, sit in the seat, which is a big part of it. It's tight quarters. So when you're making guitar changes on Broadway, if you go too high, you could hit your tuner on like you get a ceiling like here, and then your guitar's out of tune. So all this kind of stuff, that's a big part of what it is to sub on Broadway. Just the moves of putting stuff down is like, ooh, this is hard. But you needed all the pedal presses that were marked in the whole thing, all of it. So anyway, somebody's watching me. They come up to my side, and I'm thinking, go away. Like I am my mind, like I don't care who you are, like I am busy right now. And eventually I look up and it was Phil Collins. So I was like alone and Phil Collins was still there because it was early in the run and he's literally watching, a little thumbs up emoji there.
Yeah.
He's watching me go through the score. And I remember, all of a sudden kind of recovering. Oh, not really nice to meet you. I hope I do a good job. And he's, yeah, sounds great. Sounds like he got it all together. And I remember there was one little lick that JJ, my friend, did in the show that I thought maybe I'll do a different one there. I got this. This would be a cool lick to do there. I changed one lick.
Okay.
From it. And it gets to the end of the show and everybody's, oh, great job. And then I get a call the next day from JJ. He goes, yeah, you said, I think, in this song, you named the song, you go, there's this one lick. And he said, and I said, oh yeah, I did a different lick than you there. He goes, yeah, don't do that again.
Don't do that again.
So I went, okay, I guess. He said, yeah, Phil said something to the conductor, Phil Collins.
Phil, wow. Holy cow.
Like, he played some lick there that wasn't supposed to be there. So I learned my lesson with that. But anyway, that's what led to Rock of Ages, I guess.
By the way, that reminds me of a funny story, not related. I watched this interview with Brad Pitt when he was really, really, he was obviously successful, but he was talking about coming up. And so he was doing a lot of extra work. And so he finally had a part in a movie, no lines. And he was a waiter just going around the table, refilling water, pouring water. And he said just something when they're going through the scene, he pours water. Person looks over his shoulder, didn't expect that because the water was coming over. And as she looks up, he says, can I get you anything else? And she's like, no, I'm good. And they keep going on. Then when they cut, the director comes up and then he goes, you ever do that again, you're never going to work in this town. Because he's figuring I'm going to get my SAG card. I have a line, but he just dumped it in completely on his own. He's like, yeah, that could have ruined my career right there. So that was your Brad Pitt jumping in line moment.
Yes,
and of all people to be there is Phil Collins to go, no, that's not the riff I wrote.
Yes, exactly.
That's
Don't
great.
do that lick again. So that, I guess in the big picture, what that was, there was minimal amounts of work going in and subbing for him on those shows. But what ended up happening through just kind of doing that, the self-betterment thing, wanted to work on my reading and just good experience was that the keyboard player at Tarzan became the music supervisor for this show Rock of Ages that was coming to Broadway, and it was going to be an 80s hair band musical or whatever, something like. And by that point in time, I had the Night Ranger gig, and I've been working with them, I think, about a year, close to a full year. And this show comes in, I get the call, and I was like, oh, that's great. I said, I'm in Night Ranger now. He goes, oh, that's amazing. He's like, there's songs in the show. Sister Christian is in the show. And
wow,
I thought, wow, this is great. This is like worlds collide from this pit thing into like this Night Ranger. I was like, great. So started doing that. I had to have a little stare down because to play on Broadway, you can't sub out initially. Like when it's previews is the only period they're like, you absolutely have to be here until after opening night. And there was Night Ranger gigs during previews. Like, I can't, like, I just, here I'm really like, I need to, sorry guys. So I had to have a stare down with the show, and they were like, well, we need you for previews. So you're either doing this gig or you're not. And I had to have a stare down with them where I went in and said, okay, I'm out. Like, I can't do it. Here's the contract back or whatever. And then they said, all right, we'll let you sub out for previews.
Oh, nice.
Said, okay, cool. All right.
Very cool.
And once you're past that initial stage of a Broadway show, that's really when it becomes, I hate to say it sounds awful, but the best thing about having a Broadway gig is that the musician union is structured so that you can take off whenever you like.
Okay.
It's easier than actors. Actors have a really hard time getting days off. With us, you can sub out basically as much as you want. And your gig is protected, is like a white hiring slip, so you're not going to get fired. Nobody can go in and sub and say, hey, I could be here all the time, or I'll take less money or stuff. Like none of that occurs. Like it's your gig until the show closes. So that really led to a period there with me being able to go out with Night Ranger during that time where I could come home and I was immediately on a stage again and playing 8 shows a week. And I was like, wow, I'm playing constantly during this period, constantly on a stage. And that's really invaluable experience to have that 6-year period during that. So the next little piece to the puzzle that gets added, not little, it ended up being the biggest piece of the puzzle in a lot of ways for me is Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Yeah. So during this time now, I'm about 2 years in on that. And so
did you know Al Petrelli before that?
No. So I was 2 years in on Night Ranger, and is that right? Yeah, two years in on Night Ranger, and kind of the same for Rock of Ages, like I guess a year or two. And
were you with TSO during the Kelly Keeling period?
No. Kelly was before me. I joined. So this is 2010 that I joined. That I got offered the basically Alex Skolnick needed to take a year off. He got offered a good opening slot with his jazz trio thing.
Okay.
And just was looking to take a year off and go do that. And so it was, despite eventually, like I first auditioned for Al, and that went well, ish. It was kind of weird. They had me playing all alone at SIR. So I kind of thought, well, I'll go in, and they kind of didn't give me a whole lot of notice. I remember I was doing a promo event for Rock of Ages in Chicago. I needed to get it. Like I landed, and they were like, listen, we had some people that didn't show, or it's going faster. And we thought, can you just come straight here? And I remember I'd only had the songs for like a day or two. I was like, man, I only have like snippets of stuff together. I don't even have this material down. And Dina at the time, the talent coordinator, said, that's right. Al just wants to get a read on you, hear you play, get to know you a little bit. Come down. So I go in, and then what I did know, Dina was taking video of, which at the time I didn't really realize. This is back when it was flip cams. It wasn't even the iPhone. And she was taking that video, I'm sure, for Paul O'Neill. And I just felt really awkward. I was playing. I thought, well, they'll have a band for me to play with, or backing tracks or something. And there was just nothing. It was just me.
Just you.
So I just didn't move. Like I just kind of like played the stuff and went like, well, that's how it goes. And I, as I found out years down the road, at first I wasn't hearing anything. And, well, I'm trying to, it's so long, incredibly long-winded. But then Rock of Ages went on America's Got Talent, where I did move, and Dee Snider sang with us on that spot.
Yeah.
So I was on national TV, and I was doing moves, the stage moves and stuff. But it was at that point in time, Magic. I remember almost not sending it to Dina. I did because I was like, I didn't hear anything from that audition. That's okay. I got Night Ranger. I got Rock of Ages. I'm really busy. Like it'd almost be terrifying if I get it because like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I said, I don't know if this helps at all, but here, it's just on America's Got Talent. She said, no, I think this will help a lot actually. And because as it turned out, Paul had watched a video of me standing there and thought, well, that plays great, but he's got zero stage presence.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to work out. And then he saw me on that spot and went, okay, we'll have him in for the second audition in Tampa. So I flew down to Tampa, basically hung with Al that day. Paul was always late. So Al and I kind of, sometimes I was in the live room jamming through a Marshall half stack on my own, waiting for Paul to be there to play for him, going through stuff. And then Al was kind of hanging out on the sofa playing acoustic, which I love to do too. So he and I ended up spending a lot of time just doing that, talking. And I think most of it came from Al, because when Paul finally came to the audition, I played a little bit for him, but first thing he did was take Al out back and talk with him, which was probably like, is this guy going to work? Is it going to work out? Which I think Al probably gave the thumbs up to. I'm speculating. I don't know this for certain, but so I was basically offered TSO, and that was, like I said, scary because now I needed what was a very workable situation in terms of subbing out at Rock of Ages and playing with Night Ranger was going to be something where I had to go to Night Ranger and say, I want to stay in your band, but I'm not going to be able to play with you in November and December.
Yeah.
And not only that, but go to Rock of Ages, like, hey, I'm not just going to be leaving on weekends. I'm going to be leaving.
No, you don't have me during November and December.
So
I just want to point out how small the world is to you here for a second. So I'm going to mention some people I know and some names, people I've done work with. You're going to see how it's a miracle we haven't met until today. So back when I was writing and engineering and producing, I used to, well, first of all, my friend Tony went to GIT in 89. So you guys missed each other like by a millisecond. That's number one. When he was in there, he got the gig with a band called Keel, with Ron Keel, and he was playing with Ron and whatever. He did that. Then he came back, and we were producing a band called Baton Rouge, which is how I met Kelly Keeling, and we did that stuff. On the first Baton Rouge record, we hired Joe Franco to play drums.
Oh, right on.
Okay, and Joe's amazing. He's a great guy. I love Joe, but Joe was in Widowmaker with Petrelli.
Right? and D. Yeah.
And D. And so later on, my friend Tony comes back, puts a band together called Strength. We're all living in the band house. I'm living in there. I got a studio at the top floor. I'm running a snake down to the basement. We're cutting tracks. I finally open up like a commercial space. We're having a blast. And D has the SMFs out, right? I won't say what it stands for. You know what it stands for. Yeah. And my friend Tony, like the rhythm section, drummer, bass, get them. My friend Tony on guitar, get the gig playing with D in SMF because he saw their band play at a place in Jersey at the time. It was called the Birchill. So Tony's in SMF for 10 years. He says he calls it rock and roll fantasy camp because he'd be like you, teaching 1 million students all week and then go to Sweden and play a festival for like 60,000 people and then come home and go right back to teaching guitar and do all that stuff. So I know of Al. I've actually been on a call with Al, but we're not friendly, but I think, I know his name. He knows who I am. Great friends with Joe Franco. I've talked to Dean numerous times because my friend Tony was in the SMFs for 10 years. I just can't believe, especially when did you move to New York, by the way?
That was 2001. And
okay,
then
I moved out of the tri-state area in 2004. I'm just shocked that we haven't met until now, but here we are in all these like lanes that we were running, intersecting across each other. It's just pretty funny, pretty funny. So you come out of Night Ranger, you got all these choices. You're in TSO, you're juggling all of these things. Clearly, finding your path to successful musician. When did the Whitesnake thing come along, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, that was 2014. At this point in time, had a little window in time there where Night Ranger went on a very long tour with Foreigner and Journey and Phil Carson, who managed Foreigner. Phil's name is going to be relevant. also managed Dee Snider. Dee Snider had actually decided to join the cast of Rock of Ages for a while.
Yeah,
So
I
Phil
remember
was
that.
around, got to know Phil. And so suddenly Night Ranger's on the road with Foreigner and Journey, and we're playing these, a huge shed tour, playing for 20,000 people a night, setting venue records. Don't Stop Believin' was really popular at the time, like not just due to Rock of Ages, but also Glee and all that stuff. It kind of, that
Yeah.
was right when it experienced like its rebirth and became
Has
like
it ever been not popular? I mean, just,
I mean, I
that
think that
song
was
still
really,
lights up stadiums and all that stuff,
that was the initial relighting of it, though. Like
Okay.
that period of time was where Don't Stop Believin' became this huge thing again. And so anyway, I ended up, Mick Jones went down on that tour with Foreigner, and Phil ended up saying, well, I mean, I know Joel knows a couple of the songs from Rock of Ages. Let's see if he'll fill in for Mick. And the next thing I know, I'm on that tour and I'm playing with Night Ranger and filling in for Mick and Foreigner and going on
Wow.
stage with those guys after. And that happened on 24 hours notice. So I had to learn that in like a day. And then, so that was a fun little side trail in there. And then 2014, started to be a situation where it looked like Rock of Ages was going to be closing. You start to hear whispers about like, I mean, it's been 6 years, which is incredible. That's like, I don't know how many of those shows I played, but probably 1,800 performances of it or something like that.
Wow.
And I probably of Love Janice are doing it here. And in the regional theaters probably played about 1,300 of those too. I mean, like some of these things I'm talking about were like an incredible amount of reps, man. And,
wow.
So yeah, so it looked like that was going to close, and I was thinking, man, I might need something that's, maybe the next step, or I don't know. I don't know. I was just keeping eyes and ears open, which I guess I always do, and that was just something where Doug Aldrich was leaving, and sometimes the early bird gets the worm. I mean, I was just like right on it. I think that pretty much the day it was there, I was like, well, I mean, the Night Ranger had opened for Whitesnake, and I'd met David. And I knew Reb, I knew Doug, and I thought one way or another, I should be able to get some videos to David and maybe get an audition. All these things always kind of begin with that. I always think like I might as well like try an audition. That's the,
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, fine. But I didn't hear anything back because I just kind of sent pre-existing links to like Night Ranger videos, and I don't think David got very far. I think he watched like half of one and went, not the guy. And so I wasn't hearing anything, and I thought, well, come on, man, this is ridiculous. I should be able to get an audition. And who would know him? And I happen to think Phil Carson, because he's a Brit and legendary manager. David's a Brit. And I thought they're going to know each other. And so I asked, and sure enough, Phil knows David really well. They're friendly. I'll write him an email, sends David an email saying, this guy filled in for us in Foreigner on 24 hours notice and, knew the whole set and helped us out. And I suggest you give him a look. It just happened to email came across as David was coming out of meditation about like, who's going to be my next guitar player. And then it was just a ding on the email and,
Man.
And Phil saying that. And so David had me out, and then that went really well. The audition was great because David and I just kind of clicked right away, like in terms of personalities and what he was looking for. We did some.
Who was in the lineup, Joel, at that time?
Tommy Aldridge, Reb Beach, Michael Devin, David, and Michele, our keyboard player, technically got hired after me. So they're kind of figuring out who was going to play keyboards on the Purple album at the time. Okay. So there technically wasn't a keyboard player for that brief moment when I was hired. So yeah, that was the lineup. So I came in and they were working on the Purple album already. So they put up Lady Double Dealer and had me do a take on a solo, and they liked what I did, and then it was done pretty quick. So they said, well, there's a harmony solo that we want to do after it. Can you come up with something? And I ended up just kind of writing a part, and they were like, love it. And then they said, great. And I said, you want me to do the harmony too? And then I just cooked up what would be the harmony to it and tracked that. And that was enough for David to go, all right, this guy knows what he's doing. And like, let's eat dinner. So we ate dinner. I think just personality test probably more than anything. And then after that, we strummed on acoustic and sang a bit together just to make sure I could carry somewhat of a tune. And So we sang and David offered me the job.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing. So now with David retiring, is there going to be like a Whitesnake experience that carries on?
I mean, anything like that would have to come from David, and
Yeah.
doubtful. I mean, I think there's been a lot more rumors than anything. I think that maybe it's speculation because we had done the one gig that Marco Mendoza set up that was sort of like, Dino, Michele, myself, and then basically Dino's band from there. And just checked with David if it was all right. And we were calling it All-Star Band and, featuring members of Whitesnake. And that was, David was like, yeah, cool, have fun, And so we did that. And then there was another one set up. And then that just kind of like things got ahead of itself, I think, in terms of what the last one was and what this was going to be. And rumors on the internet started flying. Everybody just picked it up and grabbed it and like ran with it and it was none of that was ever the plan or authorized in any way, shape or form, aside from doing the single show, the second show where David was like, sure, it's going to be like the other one. Okay. Yeah. Go have fun. Great.
It's funny because with David retiring, there's this whole, the legacy of Whitesnake and the fan base is still there, and it's interesting with the right lineup and, from my perspective with Dino doing the gig on mic versus keyboards, it would be incredible. And I could picture Coverdale going, hey man, I've had this amazing run. I've been out here 5 decades. It's been unbelievable. These songs need to keep living. These guys are Whitesnake. They play and sing it, as good as anybody, right? This is it. This is my band. Dino's already in the band, right? And, I don't know if you guys have an interest in doing that, but it would just be cool to carry on that music. I think promoters would eat that up. And I think you guys would get some amazing, amazing gigging opportunities from that. One man's opinion. One man's opinion.
It feels out of place for me to comment on anything like that when David has like spent his life building the brand of Whitesnake. Yeah. So I think anything
very fair, Joel. Very fair.
Anything like that would have to come from him. It's not up to somebody who is like part of one of the chapters of Whitesnake to talk. It's talking out of place. Beyond.
I'm trying to get a scoop here, Joel. I'm trying to get a scoop.
Well, I try to be transparent with talking about what was authorized as far as like those 2 one-off gigs.
Yeah.
And David was okay with that, but there was never any type of, I think if it was anything more than that, when people start talking about naming it or touring and all that, that's stuff that would all have to come from David. That is way, way beyond my territory.
Yeah. So, I just didn't know if he was considering anything like that, but
I don't think so. I think it's just been more rumors than anything. I hate to tell everybody.
That's okay. I've tried to unearth the scoop. There's no scoop to be had. So it's super cool. So that was what he announced his retirement last fall, winter, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was the opening day of the TSO tour. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got like the double whammy here to post on social media that David is officially announcing his retirement. And by the way, I'm starting a tour right now. So yeah, and I'm really happy for him. David was really fantastic to work for. I didn't know what to expect going in. You go into those things, fingers crossed, and ended up just being like totally, totally awesome. The thing that I don't know if people often recognize about David Coverdale is if you followed him on Twitter during the time, I don't care what lineup it is. He's always championed his players and built them up. Yep. I never saw anybody do that, like band leaders on a regular basis where they're tweeting out their players. And if I did an external show, like something like an acoustic show with Brandon Gibbs, David was tweeting it. And I was like,
amazing.
I never saw that kind of support from, he's amazing in that regard.
That's really special.
Not my most well-spoken moment there, but like,
no, it's okay.
You don't run across that often, I guess is my point.
That's heartfelt, Joel. And it's It's nice because, I have a saying, you raise yourself by raising others. It's a saying that's around, but I've tweaked it for my own words. And it's like, I've always in my life and watched people who are really out there helping others. You could just see them rise, you
Mm-hmm.
raise your own stock by raising other people's stock, and it comes. And it sounds like that's what David was doing for the team, for the band. That's really cool to hear.
I mean, honestly, like really, just wish him nothing but the best. And like, it would be wrong to expect anything other than what he wants. And I think he's at peace with it, I think. And
he should be. He's had an amazing run.
Yeah, I mean, dude, what a run.
Legend.
Yeah, legend. Deep Purple, Whitesnake, the whole thing, and do a Coverdale Page in that time. I mean, what a career. Any of us would be like completely blessed to experience that. So like, I wish him nothing but the best. And if that's where his happiness is and his peace is, then like, dude, go for it.
I could tell you exactly where I was when I heard Still of the Night. Just, it blew my ears and my flesh off my face. I mean, that was just, it sounded amazing. He sounded amazing. The band sounded amazing. The riff was cool as shit. I mean, I was like, all right, this album is it was unbelievable. But, at that point, David had some career, but this for me was like a David Coverdale reawakening. Like,
well, not uncommon in the States to experience it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing really upon joining that you become more aware of is like, oh, Whitesnake had a whole like period of success prior to anything that we were. The first thing I heard from Whitesnake was, I believe, Slow and Easy.
Yeah, great.
First song that I heard from them. And I remember being at my friend's house and playing pool on their pool table, hearing that and going like, cool, it's a cool tune. Kind of bluesy, like for what's happening right now, and slide it in. And so like this casual awareness of them. The
Same for me.
The Geffen stuff. And then the 87 record obviously was like just omnipresent for us here in the States. When you talk to the UK fans, they were following Whitesnake all the way from the beginning. It just was. Totally. And then I think Slip of the Tongue for all of us then, because of the 87 album, we get Slip of the Tongue and wore that out. So that was kind of the way Whitesnake was for me. Now, obviously, upon joining, you go back and you listen to the whole catalog, and that's when I really was like, oh man, there's so much good music.
So deep.
In the catalog. It's incredible.
Joel, what's next for you? What are you doing now? Where are you heading? What's next?
Well, I just finished up Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which is now, I mean, fast forward 16 years later, that decision or that moment of almost not sending that email to Dino with the link to America's Got Talent, that almost never occurred, which is incredible. And there's obviously been so many other little windows that have passed in that time, playing with Cher, which was supposed to be a few shows, turned into like doing all these Vegas residencies and touring with her. I toured the States, Europe, and Australia with her. And I think the main thing is that I feel like I'm at that stage right now where it's like, hey, as long as I'm busy and I'm working with guitar, I just kind of see where things lead me. Now, joining a full-time band can be tricky. Having Trans-Siberian Orchestra for 16 years and November, December is like, so as it worked out a couple of years ago, I went in and did some touring with Accept, like kind of a fill-in basis, because it prearranged and like, hey, we're going to be going out to South America and the European festivals during this time, and our guitar player can't do it. Okay, cool. Perfect. So maybe something along those lines would fit best for me in terms of when people ask me, like, are you joining another band? It's like, I mean, yes and no. It's like, I'm trying to balance everything that I have going on. Obviously, my record coming out right now, which is the primary reason for us talking today, we haven't even talked about Joel Hoekstra's 13, which is my
Tell me all about it.
Yeah, so that's From the Fade. And so I started releasing those because things took off for me in the hard rock scene. And people were going back to listen to those solo records I was talking about before, going fusion and fingerstyle acoustic. Like, why don't you make some rock stuff? Nobody was into it, So I thought, okay, cool. I will. I wanted to do that. So I made Dying to Live in 2015, recruited a lot of my favorite classic rock guys. So all these have Vinny Appice on drums.
Nice.
Tony Franklin on bass. Derek Sheranian on keyboards, and Jeff Scott Soto on backing vocals because he's a friend. So Jeff will, make the album amazing because he's killer at that, and he fronts a lot of other things already. And then the lead vocals have kind of gone between, first album was Russell and Jeff splitting it, Russell Allen from Symphony X. Second album was Russell, and now the third and fourth albums, this upcoming album, are Girish Pradhan singing, who's just kind of really started to go viral. He did America's Got Talent himself.
Okay.
This year, they brought his band over, Girish and the Chronicles from India. So anyway, From the Fade is going to be coming out February 27th. I'm not sure when you're airing the podcast here, but that's going to be happening, and excited about that. This is probably the most heavy one I've done, and that's probably due to having Girish sing and writing a little bit for his range. So the MO with me with these Joel Hoekstra's 13 things versus solo albums is to not really make them sound like a guitar showcase. They're meant to sound like a band. The hitch being I do the writing. So I get to write the lyrics, the vocal melodies, the riffs, everything, oversee the mix, oversee the artwork.
Amazing.
But have it sound kind of like more along the lines of what I like with hard rock. And that's to listen to something that sounds like a band setting.
Where'd you record it?
I'm not as into just everybody remotely, doing
nice. Sending tracks all around.
Yeah, their home studios, which, I'm an advocate of, for in a lot of ways. I think that everybody likes that whole, you get in the room together, and it's like, yes, but then everybody's just sitting around waiting on your takes. And if it's taking you multiple takes, you start to get self-conscious and you end up settling. And if you're on your own, you'll do a gazillion takes with no inhibitions and even try crazy stuff because you won't feel like, well, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of everybody here. I mean, when you're home alone, you'll do anything as far as takes and try whatever without feeling like stupid or silly for doing so. So, I mean, I'm a fan of that kind of style of recording. I understand the concept of being in the room together and the chemistry and all that. I think it's a different animal with this. This is basically my outlet, my creative outlet while I'm doing gigs and doing work with guitar to be able to write, leave more behind than hey, this guy had cool gigs, which we spent the bulk of this interview talking about. But doing those solo albums and now doing 4 of these to kind of go alongside the, hey, he played with, for me is really important.
Yeah, totally.
Rather than just being the guy who was only the sideman or only the player, but to actually be the writer and the artist as well, to me has always been important. So anyway, people can check out, there's a few singles up online right now from the Fade, and it comes out February 27th. Sorry.
Well, what I'm going to do to coincide with that release, this episode is going to come out sooner, but I'm also going to have 10 shorts cut up, and I'm going to specifically put my time, energy, and money behind promoting those shorts specifically to lead to your episode as my thank you for you coming on the show today. So I want to get the word out about the new release. Where will it be released? On a website? Are people going to have to buy CD? Can they download it? How's that going to work?
So it's released through Frontiers Music SRL. I'm trying to think what the .com is off in the hand right now, but I'm going to the Frontiers website, and of course it'll be available on all the streaming sites, which is the kind of the listening of choice these days. The singles are already out right now. There's videos for a couple of them on YouTube, and one has a little visualizer, so you're not bored out of your mind listening to it on YouTube if you want some kind of visual. So they can check those out, and the whole record will be up, and it'll be also released in vinyl. And actually, if you go to my website, I have the pre-order link up right now. So if you go my name is hard, so I'll spell it for people. Joel, Joel, Hoekstra, HOEKSTRA.com. You can have poker on my website, but you'll see right away on the front page there's a link for ordering the album.
I'll put that link in the description section of this video, so people will see it right away. I'll put all your socials, every way in the universe to find more about you, other links to if you have a special link to another thing you've done, a performance or anything, just shoot me a note, let me know. I'll include that.
Well, there's a lot on my .com. If you go there, David Coverdale would always joke that it's my Encyclopedia Britannica. And you go there, he's like, I've never seen so much information on a website about somebody in my life. I'm like, well, it's not necessarily for everybody to look at. It's kind of for me too, to be able to go back and look at it and go like, oh yeah, that's right, this and that. So there's all different videos I've been in on the video page. You can track that all the way back to stuff where you'd be like, wow, you'll see me in a D. Snyder video on there that with Mike Portnoy. And we were both just, all we were as video performers. We didn't play on it was when
Oh,
he
really?
did as Broadway.
Okay.
And so like the both of us just going crazy on Mac the Knife, and
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, like just fun stuff. So there's stuff that you could track all the way back to that, but the Night Ranger videos I was talking about, or any of the Whitesnake videos, the Joel Hoekstra's 13 stuff, it's all there. And so people
That's
can
killer,
check
man. Hey, early on you said something, and we can wrap up around this. You said you sort of had to take a vow to, like, I think you said a life of poverty, maybe some tongue in cheek, but I understand, because when I had my recording studio, I was married with no kids.
Mm-hmm.
And in 96, my first daughter was born. Mm-hmm. And so now I had this big responsibility. And I always told my wife, like, if we didn't have kids, I would have slept on the pull-out couch in the studio for the rest of my life, waiting to be the lucky son of a bitch who was turning the knobs and mixing the tracks when the next Dark Side of the Moon was made. That's just, but I made some choices. I went into a life of technology, and I've had an amazing run. But so that's a little nugget. Like, you're committed to the road, to the path, to the never giving up. What advice would you give musicians who are now heading down this same road as you, after hearing this amazing story about your journey?
Well, I actually meant the committing to a lifetime of poverty, being like cool with that. There's nothing tongue in cheek about it. It's actually true. And then I think that a lot of the stories I told, what people need to recognize is that, say the World Stage gig, for instance, Jim paid fine for like the show, but to get 36 songs together meant prepping for weeks. And when you broke down, by the time I was done doing that, flying there and playing it, people need to recognize I was probably making 10 cents an hour or something like that.
Totally.
And to get down 300 pages to sub on the pit stuff to land Rock of Ages on Broadway, I was probably making less than that. I was probably making a nickel an hour or something like that. So if you just work no matter what, don't negotiate yourself onto the sofa and sit there.
Totally.
Just get out and like work, and then your value builds, and then you can negotiate if somebody else is going to pay you more to do something else. And you can say, I'd love to do that, but I have this. Like when I had the double bookings or triple bookings with gigs, well, then you have some legitimate ground to stand on. But until then, just work. And that's to I guess when you're like, what's next for me is that, like, I just keep working and don't stop. And so, today I'm doing a session as soon as we're off right now. I'm going to record. I'm going to teach 5 lessons remotely, which I do here, like pretty much where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
And so, all I do is do that. And then life kind of has a way of putting you where you belong.
Totally.
But put in the work, and that's my best advice to players. That's how it worked for me. Different era we're in nowadays, with you got to pay a lot of attention online and content creation and all that stuff.
Yep.
I do root for young players, and I want them to be able to experience what I've been able to experience and having a nice career doing this. And as it turned out, I didn't experience a lifetime of poverty, but I was committed to that, and I'm still doing it, even if I was completely broke right now. So
that's amazing. Every time I'm out, if there's a live performer, if I'm out at a restaurant or a bar or something, on a rare occasion, and there's a tip jar, I always dump a 50 in it. And people look at me like, why do you give every time out, like you give this guy or this gal, you're putting a 50 in the bucket. And they go, what do you think you make for they make for the night, and tips, this and that. And I go, has nothing to do with what they made for the night, man. I go, too many hours were spent being able to do that set, the gear they bought, going through pedal boards and whatever, and new tracks and stuff. I go, you guys have no idea that, if you look at the book Outliers, your 10,000 hours, that guy's probably got 50,000 hours in just to come out and make $500 tonight or $350. Right. Yep. I said, so, having that perspective and understanding that, I'm constantly going to do my part and give to, people out there doing it, if you're just doing it. dude, you're unbelievable. This was great. Thank you for going so deep and me taking you back, because I wanted to get to know you, and I wanted the audience to really get to know you. And I really wanted them to have an appreciation for the amount of work you put in. Because if you go chat GPT you and you get this discography out there, like, oh my God, the guy's the luckiest guy in the world. He's done all these great things. And it almost looks like from the outside that somebody's dealing cards. Hey, Night Ranger gig. Hey, Whitesnake gig. No, man, you had to make that shit happen. And you took advantage of one situation to the next. And it's the same if you own a business. It's the same if you're heading to law school. It's the same for everything, Joel. You happen to choose the path of music to make shit happen. And massive respect for you. And we're going to stay, hopefully we're going to stay in touch. I'm going to keep my eye on all the things you're doing. So this is super cool. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, man, I appreciate that. I mean, that's what it's been for me. And sometimes it's different for others, but that's the way it was for me. Working class. So, and I wouldn't have it any other way, man. I remain as such, even though I've had some success, man. I'm still a working class guy, you know.
I love it.
That never ends.
Well, thanks for coming on. Stick around if you would, please. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.